It is 7:03, and I'm going to call us back to order after our break. For everybody at home, we came together and we're called to order at 6 o'clock for our December 3rd BUHS District 6 Board of Directors meeting, and then we immediately went into an executive session. After the executive session, which we just came out of, we took a break before coming up here. And there was right after executive session, there was a motion made to accept the recommendation by the administration in relation to the student matter, and that passed 7-4 and 1 abstained. So that has passed, and now we are into regular board meeting time. And let's start, as we do, with the clerk's report and item A, which is the approval of the minutes of our November 19th meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections, changes we need to make to those minutes that anybody can see? All right, seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of November 19th as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstentions?
Same.
Abstaining from absenteeism. Okay. All right. Are there any communications that any board members have that they've gotten since our last meeting they want to share? Seeing none. All right. So we'll move out of clerk's report to recognition of groups and or individual visitors, and we don't have anybody other than the normal suspects, and we will have a reporting time later. So is there a motion to enter consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All right. All in favor for entering consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? None? Okay. So let's start with finance, building, and transportation.
Okay. Finance, Building, and Transportation has met twice since the last board meeting. First on November 19th, and at that meeting we did approve some warrants, numbers 1096 through 1100, 1102 through 1106, in the amount of $415,658.38. Payrolls from November 9th at $517,066.54. And payroll from November 21st, $634,904.94. We also met on November 29th, and at that first meeting, we also did a fair amount of budget review. And we're going to go over the first go-around of the budget with the board here, but let me go through the two meetings first so that it works, and then you can allocate me some time if you want to talk about the budget a little bit. At the 11/29 meeting, we reviewed the revenue budget. And the revenue budget, and Frank will probably have some comments on that. That's still a work in progress, I would say. A lot of it depends on numbers that come down from the state, which are due by December 15th, so we can figure out our equalized student numbers. And that will tell us the impact on the tax base, or the tax level for the various towns. At this point, we have probably a pretty decent idea, but last year, as you may recall, there was a curve thrown in. The number of full-time equivalents changed dramatically when we got the state numbers. We had to scramble. So hopefully the revenue figures will be as anticipated. At this meeting on the 29th, we also spent some time discussing the implications of the state board decision on consolidation. That was less than 24 hours old, so it's hard to not get on that topic, but we did bounce that around some. And now we've had a total of 3 finance committee meetings where we've reviewed budgets. We've gone through the BAM's budget, the Career Center, the high school budget, and the district-wide budget, and then we're given some information on special education, and as I said, beginning to talk about the revenue budget. So I believe we've just handed out to everybody a 6-page summary, all 50 pages of the budget, or 60 pages kind of condensed, to make it a little easier to go through. And I will, at the pleasure of the chair, do that now or do it later, or,
That's fine with me, if everybody's good with that, we can go now.
okay. So, the fiscal year 20 budget we're into. And as usual in the fall, the Finance Committee will develop some suggestions, so to speak, for administrators in terms of what we would like to hopefully see in the budget. And I think it's either 9 or 11 years now, and I've said the same thing, passed it along to the Finance Committee, that our direction has been to develop a level service budget and generally level funding. This year we were a little bit of opening on the funding because there are some circumstances that would make it so that a slight increase might be warranted. Discretionary spending, once again, to be held to minimal increases and no new programs. So I know that the first thing most of you are going to do are look at the back page, page 6, to see what the bottom line is. How many have already done that? So the bottom line, and I will go back and go through this, but the bottom line is a 2.94% increase in spending. Now, bear in mind that this number is prior to any kind of reimbursement or state and federal aid, which will offset some of this, and I'll go through those numbers when we get down to them. But in terms of the expense change, that's where we're at. So I'd like to go back and start at the top of page 1, and where it says the general operating, and it's the BAMS, the middle school is the first one. When we talk about a budget and whether or not how we're level funding, it's often appropriate to take a look at how big our customer base is. And as most everybody knows, we've had over the last few years somewhat of a decline in our student population. It appears that that has leveled off, and all 3 of the administrators, BAMS, BUHS, and the Career Center, have projected increase for next year that we're basing our budget on. In the case of BAMS, it's approximately from the current 284 to 314. So I would say that's a significant increase, and it's really good to see after years that we've kind of been on a down or level. So bearing in mind an increase in the BAMS population, we'll go through this real quickly. The principal increase in the BAMS budget is related to academic support position. And maybe, Keith, could you just give it 30-second call on what that is?
Yeah.
What that would happen?
Well, it's a new position, but so I think Frank explains it probably better than me, but it's a new position, but it's also got a revenue source with it through Title I federal funding. So we hired someone, so it looks like an increase in the spending, but we also have a new revenue source, if I'm correct, Frank.
That's right.
Yeah, so very much needed. The number of students that qualify for additional supports to help them meet the grade level standards. So we advocated for that, and Paul Smith was able to find money in the grant to authorize me to hire that position. So that's what that is.
And looking at the top section there on page 1, the other increase you'll see of note is property and equipment, and that would be for Chromebooks, replacing the first group of Chromebooks that are 4 years old?
Yeah.
Now? Yeah. That's that increase of $17,000. Going back to salaries and benefits just for a minute, overall, you'll see increases there at all 3 units, and that is in large part due to the negotiated contract, and also under benefits, we are projecting a 10% health care increase. And that number is that firm now, pretty much?
I don't think it's been approved by the Department of Financial Regulation at the state level, but I think January they typically do finalize that.
And that number, the health insurance number, will be subject to a little tweaking in that we don't know exactly who's going to be selecting what plans, the family and the individual plans and so forth. So that number will be massaged a little bit. But in general, if you see that salaries and benefits in any particular category, it is primarily related, obviously in the case of BAMS at the top, it is the support position is in there, so that one is bigger. But generally about a 3% impact from the negotiated salaries, and healthcare at 10%. So moving on to page 2, finish off BAMS real quickly, and I'll try to keep these to a summary version. BAM's total budget is 5.61% up to $180,000. And all the various line items have been reviewed by finance. We received the full package that goes everything down to how many pencils we're buying. And discretionary spending was definitely held in good control, we feel. Moving on to the high school, starting, that's on page 2, about 3/4 of the way to the top, BUHS Senior High School. Again, looking at census, our projection there for a number of students goes from about 809 currently to 840 something for next year's projection. And again, that's a significant increase, I think. You know, based on particularly the last 15 or 20 years, that's good to see. So a big portion of our total budget is in the high school direct instructional salary, and you can see the increases there that you might expect from what I just went over. We also, under the 3rd category down, support services, this is reflects a 1.0 clinician position added in this support services, and maybe Steve would just give us a real quick.
Sure. So this year we're actually in process of hiring a second school-based clinician. We have one currently. Her caseload runs about 45 to 50 students, and she's at this point maxed out. She meets with 11 students a day. She doesn't have the time to do small groups, and so we do need another school-based clinician. The reason we're opting for a clinician is that can be used, they're going to be paid for with Medicaid funds, and Frank's staff's done a great job of finding more Medicaid funds and directing them towards the high school, so we'll be able to use those. In addition, this person, when they're hired, they will bill Medicaid for the work they do with students. So, you know, while it is an increase, it's an increase we think that we know we need, and we think it's one we can support.
Yeah. Thank you. Moving down a little further towards the last category, there's also a notable increase there, and that is around reestablishing a dean of students position. And would you just make a couple comments on that?
Sure. It's actually a combined dean of students and family interventionist position. What we're finding is that as our students become more complex with home-based trauma, as well as very stressful family situations, we're finding that those students come to school with a lot more needs. And we need to move away from the model where the student has an infraction, we give a consequence, and it never happens again, because we're finding that students don't have that ability. So we need to work more closely with students, and we need to work more closely with their families, and in some cases their other caregivers, to process what happens to them and kind of help them build long-term goals as they're here for 4 years. So That's the basic reason for this request.
Okay, thank you. So, finishing off of the high school, page 3, you can see at just about halfway down the senior high total, 5.4%, and 428,000 increase over last year. Again, discretionary expenses were held in line for sure, no new programs added, and we feel that that's a responsible budget to present for the high school. So then we move to the Career Center, and the Career Center is a little bit more of a challenge to get some exact numbers, because we also will need to know the exact count from the state in full-time equivalent students. And that will also impact the BUHS budget, and the BUHS pays tuition. So that leaves perhaps a little modification of the BUHS budget too. But the Career Center is projected to, or it went up about 4% in terms of number of is that the full-time equivalent number, right? That's over last year.
Over last year at the same time, that's
Right.
correct.
And so we would anticipate that we would continue to be moving slightly up. If you look at the overall budget for the Career Center, it's nearly a very small increase. And that's at the bottom. We skip to the bottom of page 4, 8.83%, $20,000 increase. So essentially the budget is flat. Looking at it from the start, going back to page 3, one of the things that affects the salaries and benefits not going up too much is there was a little bit of a reduction in the full-time equivalents in the dance and then digital editing program, I believe. Those two.
Yes, the dance person was put on the right time for the time allotment that they are teaching.
Yeah.
And the digital editing program was at the 2/3 position,
Yeah.
along with the assistant director. And that was that.
Now, the other thing, if you turn to top of page 4, there is an increase there in salaries and support services instructional staff, and that is for career pathways outreach, increased the position from part to full, or
The outreach coordinator is a grant position. The person in the grant was allocated at I believe, a $10,000 amount that was less than that, but this year's grant is covering that.
Okay.
We increased the grant by $30,000 also.
so there again, there's a place where revenue offsets some of the additional expense. Second category down on page 4, you see a reduction in salaries and benefits, and that reflects the not having someone in the assistant director position primarily. So overall, Career Center, pretty much a flat budget, and we'll hopefully know our student numbers before too much longer and how that will impact the BUHS budget. Okay, so then we move to district-wide, which, just as a reminder, is those things that affect all 3 units, maintenance, and all those things that all 3 schools want to get to the right spot. There we go. District starts right at the top of page 5, district-wide. And one of the first things you'll note is that direct instruction salaries are down, and that reflects the redirection of the diversity program to the supervisory union. It was in our district-wide budget, now redirected to that. And then there's one other, this is in the first paragraph, essentially on page 5. The other notable number that changes, and I'm going to need a little help with this one, it says under line 500, tuition and travel, and that's up about 40,000. Is that related to outside placements? Anybody?
I'm pretty sure it is. 500 right here. I believe that's money for, we have regular ed students that need to be placed at another setting for their education.
That is part of it, and then the other part is it's actually reflecting an assessment for the diversity, so the high school share of diversity. So it comes out of salary, that's why salary is down somewhat, but it comes back in, in part through the SU assessment. So both of those.
Okay, then the next category is support services, and that's has a modest increase. Support services instructional staff is down a little bit, and part of that is a reduction in property and equipment expense, or most of it is actually. And then under school board, or under support services general administration, the third paragraph from the bottom reflects our reduced size of our school board. We now do not have a Vernon member. The big number in the district-wide is operations and maintenance of the plant, and that is it's a huge facility, and there's a lot of money involved there. And one of the things that has been a challenge of late is our maintenance supervisor, Robert Clark, being spread pretty thin. Robert has an incredible base of knowledge and has been very helpful to the other schools in the district as well from time to time. And included in this budget is a day supervisor, and that will free up Robert to work more on the big projects, the capital plan issues, and perhaps help out in other places in the district. And that's where I'm looking at the bottom paragraph there now. You can see that coming under contract services maintenance. And actually, the day supervisor, I'm sorry, comes under salaries and benefits. The big increase under contract services and maintenance is restoring the capital plan contribution to get us back to $350,000 towards our proposed capital plan, which I'll address briefly in a minute. But let's see if we just finish up the last of page 6. Transportation down at the top of page 6, and that's net of our state payment goes toward transportation. A nice one is the location-wide debt service payments, and we're getting close to the end. I would call it close, although it's still 4 years away, but compared to where we started in 2004, I guess we're close to the end on our big project debt payments, so we have reduced interest, and the last payment on that will be 2024, so we've got a little while to go yet, but that's nice to see that helping us with the budget a little bit. And then about halfway down the last page is special education, and that's kind of a preliminary number, and that needs to be financed by the Agency of Education. Is that a 12/15 due date? Or?
It is part of that, yes.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see all that happen.
Yes.
Food services down at the bottom. Other items, and I didn't pick up on this one, but I'm looking at it now. I'm wondering what other items, 25,000.
So as part of going to the Provision 2 format for our food service, we did anticipate that the district would need to contribute more than it has in the past toward balancing the program. So that's the part where all of our students are eating for the eligible meal and the breakfast free, and the district is contributing toward that model, which is, it was nearly nothing, and now we've estimated 30,000 for fiscal year 20, the whole program's new to us, so we'll monitor that to make sure that it is properly funded.
Thank you. So putting all this together, we get back to the number that we mentioned at the start, 2.94% increase in the budget, subject to some changes based on our full-time or student equivalent numbers. And that again will change the high school a little bit because of the tuition paid to the Career Center. And the estimate, again, I mentioned that some of this is offset by revenue, and the 2.9% when offset by revenue from Medicaid, Title I, and the Perkins and the Career Center will change that to about 2.4% increase. Just a reminder again on salary and benefits, negotiated increases are about 3%, healthcare 10%. And so the Finance Committee, again, has reviewed this pretty much line by line and feels that it's a responsible budget prepared and presented by the administrators, and would like to move it forward subject to minor tweaking as we get, some final numbers from the state.
Great. Any questions for Bob or Frank or?
Would you just restate how it gets from 2.94 to 2.4 with revenue? In other words, the revenue items reduce the percentage increase.
Yeah,
Three
so-
ways, yeah. No, that's okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I was going to say.
Numbers, I just know the three items.
Yeah, when we refine the revenue budget, which we will provide next meeting, hopefully we need those ADM statistics that Bob has referred to. But the new revenue items are $90,000 for the Medicaid subgrant, and that's to fund the clinician position that Steve mentioned. We see $28,000 in additional revenue for Title I. And just a short history on that, we're up from fiscal year 18, 120,000 Title I to a forecast of 230,000. So over the last 2 years, we've been able to secure more Title I funding, and that's the position that Keith had described. In the Finance Committee's details, that was in the English department in bands. But so what Bob is referring to is that, the funding formula is based on cost per student. So we've just outlined the cost of $24,815,000. But when we go to set a tax rate, it's this spending minus the revenue lines to give us a net amount that then goes into what's called the education support grant. That's divided by the number of students that we have, and that cost per student is what's used to set the tax rate. So you won't see a number that's published that is that net number, but it's certainly it's a good way to articulate the impact to the taxpayer. When we have new spending that's totally funded by new revenues, it's a neutral effect on the tax rate.
Excellent. Anything else?
I'd just like to thank the Finance Committee for their hard work. And there's still more to come, but,
And the administration.
and the administrator, of course.
Yes. All right, so moving on with consent agenda, WSESU Finance Committee.
We met on, we just met last Thursday is when we met. And the Finance Committee went over the SU budget. And I won't go over it in great detail because on this Thursday, the WSESU full board is meeting, and I hope, who are our members? So we'll be there. And Alice will be presenting the budget in detail similar to what Woody did. The total line, and Frank, back me up if I've got this wrong, if you switch to the right spreadsheets here. The total number percentage increase goes up by 4%. But some of it is, it goes up from 19,133,000 to 19,894,000. But the sort of the programs all stayed under 3%. I mean, the big one I reported last time was a special ed, which was about 2.4%, which is less than even the increase in salaries again. I think the only main change there was a speech pathologist that retired, isn't there. The bulk of the increase, part of it is the transportation that Guilford used to pay for their own. Remember, this is all the not just this is all the member districts, all the elementary schools. So Guilford used to be doing their own busing, but now by state mandate it comes to the SU. So that went up, 37% there. Though the funding will come up as well. So that was big. Also, the diversity coordinator, which what he mentioned was brought into the SU. One thing just to note in terms of the student enrollments going through all the towns showed an increase. Dummerston lost 2 students, 142 down to 140, but all the others had an increase. So it was a 2.2% increase in student enrollment there, which is certainly good to see. So this will be presented in more detail on Thursday. When will this be going out? I know I've sent some detailed stuff to a couple of the members who asked for it. But.
So we hope to have a summary document, much like what you just saw for BUHS. It thins down the 70-page report that the Finance Committee has reviewed over the last couple of months. And I hope to have that out tomorrow in advance of the meeting on Thursday.
We also, we went through the superintendent job description and made some suggested changes, and that will be presented at the meeting on Thursday as well. And if I've got this right, I mean, at the beginning of the SU meeting would be 6 o'clock on Thursday, and it meets here, I believe, is that right, in the Cusick room. And it'll start, this was a new addition, with an hour-long webinar on Act 46. So that'll be interesting to see. So the budget that will be voted on Thursday isn't a binding budget, but it's a planning budget, because ultimately it's in March or sometime when the new, whatever the nomenclature is, the new board will ultimately approve and then go to a public meeting. So it's a little bit, all of these budgets are a little bit, we're going along as if there are no changes. Obviously, there will be changes in governance, but you can't come up with a budget in a few weeks. So I think that I'd like to thank the administration for holding the costs down and doing a really good job on that. So I think that's all I have for the SU finance.
And again, our SU reps are you, Russ, Katie, and Ann. And is Deborah going to be there?
I am not able to be there on Thursday because I have daughters.
I was planning on going to the SU meeting anyway on Thursday night. If the rest of the board is okay with me voting on Katie's behalf, I'm willing to do that, since I was planning on going anyway.
Sure.
And any problems with that? Okay.
It's in this
Thank
room,
you.
is that right?
Yep. Yep. So I will be Katie that evening.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. All right. Thank you, Russ. All right. Planning and policy.
That's on that.
Teacher curriculum committee.
Okay, we met today at 5 o'clock, and the main agenda item was looking at the Latin program, and to remember last year's budget, in part because of the things that happened later on, it looked like we were phasing out Latin. In fact, Latin 1 is not offered this current year, but in the budget for next year, we have a half-time position. Liz Levesque, the Latin teacher, as well as Karen Sebastian and Angie Dodd were there. And with a half position, if I've got that right, there'll be 2 Latin 1s and then a Latin 3. And depending on enrollments, we'll see when they're offered. And I was wondering, well, what happened to Latin 2? But it's often not, even in the best of times, isn't offered all the time. And so that it should work really smoothly. So that was a good presentation. We had a lot of discussion on that. And then we did a little bit of planning for future meetings, looking at 4 potential 1% fund reports from all high school teachers that we were looking at, to look at those in 2019. And then also talked about different possibilities of the members of the teacher curriculum committee of going and visiting staff meetings or planning meetings or in-service trainings, those sorts of things, just to get more of a view from the trenches. And I know from my town board experience, you really learn a lot about just how hard the teachers and staff work and how seriously they take the issues and the issues that are coming up. So I know I used to find that really rewarding. So I'm hoping we'll be able to do that before this board disappears, I guess. But anyways, and that was it.
Great, thank you. BAMS committee.
BAMS committee has not met.
WRCC.
Has not met.
There's no other there. So is there a motion to approve consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? None. All right, administrative reports. Why don't we start with the Career Center?
Sure. The forestry classes have been working on a subsurface drainage project at Rosa Lily Farm in West Brattleboro. What that is, the students visit the site, develop a plan and map the area for the drainage system. And then they use transits and what's called differential leveling to determine the slope of the land. And then they actually put in the subsurface drainage system, which means that they're actually excavating the property, digging approximately a 3-foot ditch, filling it with crushed stone, drainage pipe, filter paper, and backfilling that. And then they determine what they're actually draining, how much they're draining from that property so that it's useful for the farm. And they do that in gallons per minute. So currently, I believe the section that they were doing, they were getting 2 gallons a minute, which is approximately 20,160 gallons a week from the area what they're draining, so that property is useful for the farmer to graze their cattle on. So they're just wrapping up that project as it's pretty sloppy out there right now in areas getting equipment in and out. So that's been in forestry and natural resources. I'm also proud to let you know that Megan Ferret from Dummerston, one of our business students, has been selected as one of 5 Vermont finalists for the National Presidential National Presidential Scholars Program. The Presidential Scholars Program recognizes career and technical education students who demonstrate exceptional ability and accomplishments in career and technical fields. Megan's nomination will now move to the United States Department of Education for consideration in the National Presidential Scholars Program. And Megan will also be honored at the Vermont State House on January 28th. So it's a nice accomplishment for Megan. And that's all I have tonight.
Thanks. All right, let's go to BAMS.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to report out, Tom Dotton and I, my assistant principal, we went up to Dover the other night, right after that storm. Pretty incredible on top of Dover Hill. But we go up every year and we meet with Dover students and families, and other schools kind of like this little, every school has a booth, and we try to sell our school. And we took another 7th grade student, Georgia Smith. She's a Dover student, and we're the only school who can really bring students with us and kind of show it off, so it was great. And she was terrific, telling families what it's like to be a BAM student. And we're happy we have currently 18 Dover students at BAMs and plenty more at the high school. So feel pretty good about continuing that relationship. I have a few new hires to announce. We have a new planning room paraprofessional. Her name's Trish Coyne. She's been a part-time person at Academy just this year, and she'll be coming on board soon to replace Christy Thralt, who had been here for many years. We're really excited about Trish. Prior to that, she worked for 7 years at Kindle Farm School. So the planning room paraprofessional does a lot of support with behavioral students who have some behavioral challenges, need some de-escalation, need a reset, maybe a little coaching, and she brings all of those skills. We were really impressed with her. We have a teacher going out on a leave in February, so we've hired Hadley Garcia to be a long-term sub for English for Team Taurus. She'll be taking the place of Rebecca Thwaites for a few months. Hadley got her undergraduate from the University of Texas, Austin, and her master's from UVM. She's been working as a long-term sub in Charlestown and also had worked at Monadnock as a long-term sub, so we're really excited to have her. She's excellent. I would have liked that if I could hire her full-time right then, I would have liked to have. So I'm really excited about that. We traditionally open something called Holiday Shop, which is a really nice little thing that mainly Flo Levin has promoted and organized in the past. Flo works in our PEAK program, and we open up a closet in the multi-purpose room and fill it full of donated goods, and then students who get one of those BAMS bucks, kind of an incentive piece of paper, they cash those in for those gifts, and then they can wrap them up. Actually, the students and the adults help wrap all the gifts for the students, and then they give them to the students to bring home as gifts for siblings or parents or whatever. It's a really nice, some of the things that are donated are really nice, and if you have any items that you'd like to donate, certainly anybody will take them we'll take them and set them up in the shop, so it's really nice. And that will open up to the students a week or so before the break. And last but not least, the old wood shop has been converted into a new space for the BEAMS program, and it's really really excited to see this come true. I would love to still have a woodworking program, but it just wasn't happening. So BEAMS is an incredible program, and I'm happy to support and use a space that hasn't been well utilized in a few years. So through a variety of avenues, we've moved equipment out. The Career Center took a lot of things. We sold some things on eBay last year, and we might have a local business that we're gonna donate a few other items that are kind of left over. So we're really excited about that, and now BEAMS is eager to get their things in, so they've been moving in, and it's pretty nice. It's the classroom that John Dimmick and Dana Zelenakis used to be in. And it's a corner space down, kind of looking at the tennis court. It's a beautiful classroom, so excited to have them in their own space. And the Chinese program now will have a classroom that doesn't have several other big programs in it. So that's it. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Mr. Perrin, is there a preference?
No preference.
No
All
preference.
right, I'm gonna let the students go first. Here.
Alrighty.
So I'm
Yep.
Katie Taggart.
I'm Zia Achilles. I am Amelia Glickman, and Feed the Thousands.
Yep. So on Wednesday, the student council will be having our annual Feed the Thousands kickoff ceremony, during block 2 in the auditorium. And then we'll be collecting food and donations for Feed the Thousands, and we'll do that right up until our winter break.
And tomorrow during Block 2, National Honor Society is running a community service fair in collaboration with United Way. And it's just going to get people more involved with community service.
Student Council is also working on drafting a plan for Long Block ACE, which we will, in January, be proposing to teachers at a faculty meeting. We're in the process of asking students and teachers about whether they're willing to run activity groups during this period of time so that it can be a little more structured for some students if they should choose, because this was one of the main concerns. Other than that, the flag policy, there are student council members still involved in making that policy. We've made a lot more progress, have made a pretty well drafted policy, and will be meeting soon. I believe that is it, actually. The community service fair is also a really good opportunity for students because everybody has to have 40 hours to graduate, and there are all sorts of community organizations involved, and student council is also hoping to get students involved outside of student council in overflow shelter volunteering and that kind of stuff. Yep.
Could you just explain Long Block 8 a little?
Sure.
It sounds like a type of car engine.
Long Block ACE is so right now we have advisories on Monday, and then ACE block, which is the period of time before fourth block where students are able to meet with their teachers or go somewhere to get work done, essentially. So it's separate from lunch, and it's just so that students, if they need extra help, if they need to go to a teacher to help study, if they need to complete a project, if clubs need to have meetings, et cetera, they can do it during that period of time. So Long Block ACE would then combine lunch and this period of time so that students, if they did not have an obligation to be with a teacher for a certain reason or at a club meeting, they could have a much longer lunch period, which would be almost a full block length. And that would mean that for half of that time, the students could eat lunch, and then the other half of the time they could socialize in the dedicated areas where students can hang out without disrupting classes. And there's a lot of details that go into where students are going to go, what activities will be run, the list goes on, and that's what we're all in the process of figuring out now. So we will report back the more we know.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to the high school. Mr. Perry.
They said it all. Thank you. So a couple things going on. Tomorrow we have our auditions for our winter musical. This year it is Pippin, which we've done, I think we did that in the early 90s the last time. So we're looking forward to that. I'm sure they're going to have another great show. Every year it's a huge event. Happens right when February break kicks off, so mark the calendar now. Wednesday we'll be receiving a donation from our local Summit stores, which are Exxon and Mobil stores. They are donating $500 to our STEM Academy, and this matches a grant that they're also giving to Academy School. And we're very pleased. That money is for us to use in any way we see to promote science, technology, engineering, and math in our school. So Dan Braden's very excited to see that, and I'm sure he's going to use it wisely. Last Saturday, you may have been downtown and you saw Santa Claus arriving at Brattleboro Rec. He was welcomed by members of the BUHS band, who played a wide selection of secular and non-secular tunes, and they had a great time. One of the students is in my advisory, and today he said, I had the best weekend. And I said, why? He's like, I got to welcome Santa Claus. So it was kind of a neat event. We will be looking at a biology position for the second half of the year. and that Ben Lord is taking a leave for the second semester to do some work on his own. And during that time, we'll be looking for a biology teacher. That position's been posted. So far, we have not had robust applications, but we're continuing to that process, and hopefully we'll have that squared away before second semester starts. The faculty, last week, we began a discussion among our leadership team about final exams. And as we look at our move to proficiency-based instruction, we started to think to ourselves, what are the purposes of having final exams? And our final exams, should we have a set amount that is final exam counts in a course? What should a final exam look like? In a proficiency model, students get multiple chances to make things up, but obviously a final exam has a certain finality to it. So we're beginning a conversation about final exams. One of the things that was very telling is one of our science teachers mentioned that the act of studying for an exam, like a final exam, you're not going to hear this, actually helps retention long term. And that was an interesting study that they cited. And so we're going to keep looking at this. I don't see us getting rid of something like a final exam because our students are faced with exams for their entire lives, whether it's a driver's test, an ACT, medical school exams, whatever it may be. So, but it's a conversation we're starting to have. What does a final exam look like in our new proficiency world? So stay tuned as that continues. Finally, on January 28th, it's our in-service day. It's the Monday between our semesters. We're having a presentation and training from Rescue Inc., and they're actually coming in to train all BUHS employees on a program called Stop the Bleed. And it's just what it sounds like. It's how a citizen who is confronted with a mass casualty event or a person who is bleeding profusely, how do they actually work to save lives? And there's been some work done as people have analyzed the Las Vegas shooting and other incidents that a significant portion of people actually could have been saved with a few simple stop the bleed protocols. And so it's a really heavy subject, but we felt it was important. And Rescue is going around and they're training people all over the county. And so we thought that we would be a part of that. So we're excited to have them come. And each session is 2.5 hours, and we'll spend some time getting a presentation and then some practice time. I don't know more what that looks like, but I'm sure we're going to find out. So.
Wear clothes that you don't care if they get messy.
Right. That's what Drew told me. He said it gets messy, but it's well worth it, and it's well worth to consider, to think about the prospect wherever you are in your life. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, central office.
Yes, so all of mine pertains to Act 46, so we might knock off 2 things at once.
That's okay.
All right. So November 30th, Friday, we got the final orders from the State Board of Education that Putney, Dummerston, Brattleboro, Guilford, and BU6 will merge. Today, I sent a draft warning for what the organizational meeting would look like to the Secretary of Education, Dan French. That needs to be approved and sent back before we can warn the meeting and move ahead with scheduling it. At this time, we would, once approved by the state, we would schedule that. It will probably be at some point at the start of January. Once that meeting is scheduled, there are a number of other meeting dates that sort of fall into place. Frank and I have been working over the last week or so, making sure that we know when those dates are, but they're very specific. When petitions need to go out, when petitions need to be in, what the transitional board, when the transitional board meets, when the organizational meeting meets. So we will continue to work on that and keep moving ahead.
And just so that all board members and people in the public know too, that the transitional board is made up of the chair and the clerk of each one of the existing boards and what's going to become the new merged district. So for BUHS number 6, that means myself and Sean will be serving on that transitional board. Whether or not we choose to run for an elected office after that is a completely separate situation. The transitional board is put together for a short period of time to do this work, to set these dates and to get the ball rolling so that elections can happen for the new board, the new merged board.
And one of the main roles of the transitional board will be to get the budget together to present to the new board, which is why it's important for each individual town board to put together their budget and pass their budget as a show that that the budget is supported, so that the transitional board knows that this is what the individual schools need to ensure that they can run their schools. So the transitional board, their main function will be putting that budget together for the new board.
I was just wondering, Lionel, if there's any knowledge about when the vote would actually take place to elect the district directors?
Yeah, we are hoping, Frank, was it the last week of February?
Yeah.
We're hoping, and again, it depends on the approval of the Secretary of Ed approving the meeting warning, but we're hoping it will be in the last week of February. We're also hoping that we'll have petitions ready in our town clerk's offices at the beginning of next week for people that are interested in running.
And would there be a job description of any ilk at all for individuals in the community that would be interested in running for the unified board?
I have not even thought about that.
It will be a totally different type of position, and a very important one. I think, you know, if there was a job, at least a rough job description available, then people could make a more informed decision whether they wanted to take out a petition or not.
What we did find out is if you're running from Guilford, it follows the same rules as in the past when running from Guilford. Your signatures will be from Guilford, from the Guilford voters. It's either 30 or 1%, whichever Guilford uses as their usual, their normal.
I think it is 30.
Well, what's the makeup of the board? Is it
So
9?
the first board is 2 from each town. So it'll be a little bit different. The transition board has people from this board, as well as Putney, Dummerston, Brattleboro, and Guilford. But when people are running for the new board, it's
February.
right in February. It's 2 from Putney, 2 from Dummerston, 2 from Brattleboro, 2 from Guilford, and we were given a set of articles of agreement specific to us, and in those articles, it's delineated Brattleboro, when those, what those terms would look like, so a 1-year and a 3-year. I think it's just alphabetical. Dummerston is second, and there's might be a 2-year and a 3-year or something, but in the articles of agreement, it lays out the terms for each town.
So is that set in stone, that makeup? You're saying there's equal voting for all 4 towns?
Right now, yes.
But that could be up for discussion after the article agreements, the articles are voted on, and then...
There are different things that are up for discussion. Some, almost all of them are after 2 years. So for the first 2 years, these are in place. There are some that can be changed if the voters in every town vote in the majority to do so. But
I mean, if you look at the proportionality of this board, for instance, and then you look at what's being
Yeah.
proposed or what is, the decision's been made, that's
it's very different.
it's quite unequitable almost.
Yeah.
In fact, interestingly, when we were in discussion on the article of agreement before, we were specifically told that a makeup like that was illegal.
Yes.
So how that changed? Actually.
That's a really good question.
And the voting would be at-large type of voting, in other words,
So, correct.
you wouldn't run specifically just...
You would run, so if you decide to run, you will run for Brattleboro, but Dummerston, Putney, Brattleboro, and Guilford residents will vote for everyone. So the ballot would say, choose 2 from Brattleboro, vote for 2 from Putney, vote for 2 from Dummerston. And then the top 2 vote getters in each of the towns.
Oh, that's how they did it. That makes sense.
So you could be a person from Brattleboro that has more votes than somebody in another town, but it will be the top 2 vote getters from each town that are running.
And then the petitions have to be at the town clerk, no less than 30, no more than 40.
That's the 6
I thought
Mondays.
that was 6
before
Mondays, right.
The election. So if the election is end of February, it would be mid-January.
So it's
6
coming up
Mondays.
pretty quickly.
Which is why petitions will be, hopefully be in town clerks by next week.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, and would it be possible to send the link, I mean, I could probably find it, but if I had all of a sudden the link came on my email, on where you find all that stuff about what the state has
Yep.
determined the unified district is going to, the composition of it.
I can send you a PDF that has, because I've downloaded all the documents, obviously. So
Yeah.
if you want, I can just send you the specific documents, so you don't have to go to the agency website.
Yeah,
Is that
maybe the
easy?
whole board would want that.
Exactly. I can.
Send it on.
That'd be great.
Lyle, what will the webinar be like on Thursday? Is it going to be a live back and forth?
I assume so. It's being provided by the School Boards Association, and it's to talk about, Act 46 is now what? What are, I assume, the next steps?
Is it a statewide webinar or is it specifically for the WSESU?
No, it's statewide.
Statewide.
So that wouldn't be interactive, it would just be like a presentation by the Vermont.
Yeah,
School
often
Association.
with a webinar, there are places where you can type in questions. Generally, the webinars that I attend, that there's somebody that's like moderating the questions and asking the people that are doing the presentations. Each one's a little bit different. I don't know what the format of this will be.
So do we have an idea of when this board is going to cease to exist?
June 30. So this board still has to deal with anything in this fiscal year, but anything moving into next year. So for instance, we talked a little bit about 1% at TCC. Next year's 1% would not be for this year's board. It would be for the new board. But anything still happening this year, if there were questions from the administration, if there were any kind of student issues, all of that would come to this board.
But like the TCC stuff that Russ mentioned in the message, the 1% stuff, those presentations were for last year's 1% funding, so this board would still hear, how did that go?
Yeah.
All of those kinds of things. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lyle, but I think when we talked last week, we will still have our annual February meeting, but it won't be a presentation of our budget the way we've normally done it. It'll just be sort of a recap of how's it gone, basically, and how was the year. We still have to have that annual meeting, but there won't be next year's presentation necessarily of a budget because that is going to be combined with the others. Yeah, Sean.
And I was just wondering, sort of a further thing on the question that I initially asked. If there are 30-plus board members in all the districts now, and that will be reduced to 8 individuals, so I guess I'm just restating my question. How would all the things that need to be done be accomplished by those 8 individuals? Would the central office take over more work? Because it almost seems like it would be an impossibility for 8 individuals to do what 30, how many is it altogether on all the boards right now?
Approximately 30, yeah.
Yeah, so,
I assume that we will create some subcommittees, and those subcommittees will probably be meeting. I assume in the beginning, we will meet every week, and part of that will be in creating subcommittees, and those subcommittees also in the beginning will be meeting weekly as we get established, find out which subcommittees need more time, what we need to spend time on, things that I'm wondering how we're going to work out. Will we spend a meeting that's really pertaining to BU6, because that's the majority of our students. Another meeting where we're talking about pre-K 6, 8. So those are still things that we haven't worked out. I'm going to a session on December 17th with other superintendents from around the state that are just merging now, and meeting with some superintendents that merged in the last year or so to talk about how they put all that together.
And the transitional board will not delve into all what you just said. It will be the actual board. So that'll be after June 30th.
The actual board will start meeting very soon after the elections, like the next day.
Yep.
Because they actually, the transitional board is getting the budget together. They have to present it to the new board, but the new board is the one that presents it to the electorate too. So the new board will be meeting 1 or 2 times a week at the start while we get the budget going, and then probably at least weekly after that to just talk about.
So that would be a transitional position for the new elected board, because they won't actually take the seat of voting until June 30th.
No,
No,
the newly elected board makes decisions on the proposed budget, and that's presented to the electorate in late March, early April. And they are fully empowered based on the statutes. You know, I think it's Title 16-563 is the if you got online on the statutes, you'd see the powers of the school board and then powers of the electorate. And I don't, in terms of like a job description, I don't think it's going to change. Many systems of our size have been organized as a single entity, Springfield, Montpelier, Rutland City, Burlington, South Burlington. So the VSBA would probably be a good resource as well, just in terms of, your own peers on how they functioned with multiple schools, but one entity. This won't be new ground.
Just soft.
Anything else for Lyle about, anything else for your report? Okay. And as far as my report goes, I have 2 quick things. One, Russ sort of mentioned it, that the WSESU Finance Committee went over the superintendent's job description. Also at that meeting was the superintendent evaluation, job description creation committee, what we were called, and I was there as part of that representation that we worked over the summer and into the fall for. So I was there at that meeting for that, to finalize a job description for the superintendent and all of those kinds of things. So that was a really interesting process to go through, which was really, it was nice to do. The other thing is, I'm going to make a motion here in a second, so we can talk about it, and then we'll talk about it. I'm going to make a motion that we approve the allowing a current Dummerston student whose family moved to Brattleboro to stay in Dummerston for the remainder of this academic year because of extenuating circumstances related to that student's educational needs. There is no tuitioning being asked for by Dummerston, so there's no cost effect to our budget. If someone wants to second that,
A second.
okay, we can have a conversation. So my understanding, and Lyle and I had a conversation about this, I think I kind of got that pretty well summed up, is that there's a student whose family lived in Dummerston, student is in Dummerston, is an 8th grader at Dummerston, has some educational requirements that Dummerston is meeting very well. The family has moved to Brattleboro town. They have requested for the student to be able to finish out the academic year with the academic supports in place in Dummerston for the remainder of the academic year. Normally in a situation like that, we would be approached and Dummerston would be approached, and we would be paying tuition to Dummerston. Dummerston at this point is not requiring or requesting that, so there's no financial standpoint. We just want to make sure that we're not making precedent by doing this because of the extenuating circumstances with this student's educational needs. it seems it's in the best interest of the student to stay put for the remainder of this academic year and to transition to BUHS next year as if they had not, family had not moved out of Dummerston.
Well, and since the structure and rules are all going to change next year anyways, it wouldn't matter if we did set precedent.
That's true, but I just, to be clear about that. And over the years that I've been on this board, we've had this kind of situation has come up from time to time. So this is not completely unnew that we have heard these kind of cases. It's just very infrequent that it's happened this way. So we needed to make an official motion that the board would approve that student staying put for the remainder of the academic year.
Was there a second?
Is there
I second.
Yeah, Rick seconded it. Is there any questions or discussion about that? As much as we can talk about without divulging too much, because seeing none. Is all in favor?
Aye.
Those abstentions? None? Okay, great. So that's it for administrative reports. Under unfinished business, we had Act 46 discussion, which Lyle essentially did under her reports. Is there anything else that we need to discuss related to Act 46? No? Okay, so nothing else on unfinished business. Under due business, we just had FY20 budget discussion, which, a reminder, this is our first read of that. So this will continue. But is there any other questions or thoughts related to that people need to talk about tonight?
Just one, I didn't mention this, but at our next meeting on the 17th will be public information meeting on the budget. And I believe that's scheduled to start at 6 o'clock. Or did I just make that up?
That's pretty
Did I
typical.
get that? Yeah.
That's pretty typical that we usually, for that meeting, we usually call to order at 6, do a public information session for as long as there's a need for public information. If there's public here to ask questions, Bob with some help from Frank will go through a very similar discussion as we had then. I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for Frank here, that we're holding out hope that the state will meet the December 15th deadline that they're supposed to meet, and we'll actually have real numbers by the 17th, but where no one's holding their breath for that. So that we'll do that at 6, and then we'll go into our regular meeting post that public information session. Okay. Anything else on related?
6 o'clock start on the 17th?
17th, yep.
Okay.
Anything else related to the budget conversation under new business? And that was the only thing we had under new business, so is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Opposed or abstentions? None? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. See you in 2 weeks.